Welcome to Wilmix Law Practice Information Podcasts. I'm Tom Watson. I'm speaking with Michelle Behnke of Michelle Behnke & Associates in Madison. Michelle practices primarily business, real estate, and estate planning, and her firm includes one other associate on staff. Michelle, what do you love about your practice?
I really love being able to work very directly with my clients. Most of my clients are small business owners, and so they don't have a lot of experience necessarily with legal matters. The issues that they bring to me seem really daunting to them, but I'm able to help them get through it so that they're able to focus on their business.
As a small law firm in today's economy, tell me the dynamics of that. Has it helped you?
I think it has in certain ways. Because I'm not in a large law firm and I don't have really fixed overhead, my hourly rates tend to be a little bit less than my compatriots in larger law firms. And while many clients don't necessarily appreciate the fact that oftentimes those higher rates are because they have greater experience and that may make that person actually able to do things very efficiently, when they hear the rate, it's just kind of a sticker shock. And so they do look for somebody who's perhaps a little less expensive. But the probably more important thing is they understand that I'm very much like they are. I'm a small business, and so I think they both enjoy working with somebody who is in that same boat, and they know that I can appreciate the struggles that they have, and so they feel like they're working with somebody who's really their peer.
Okay. How has the economy challenged you? There has to be some.
There certainly are. There are not as many commercial real estate transactions. There aren't even as many residential transactions these days. And with respect to estate planning, for lots of people, they see that as a discretionary item. And so while they may think it's a good idea to have a will or a durable power of attorney, when they look at their finances, now is just not the time to spend that kind of money.
What other challenges other than economic do you face on a daily basis with a small firm?
Well, certainly I don't have huge capital investment in my firm the way that perhaps a larger firm with a large line of credit might have. And so as clients maybe pay a little bit slower or things of that nature, it certainly means that I have to pay closer attention to managing the finances to make sure that I'm able to meet all my obligations.
And are there days when you wish you were bigger, or are you comfortable with your size?
Actually, I really am comfortable with my size. As I said earlier, because many of my clients understand that I'm a small business person as well, I think it's a little harder for them sometimes to think of not paying their bill. I boast, I should probably knock wood, but in 11 years of practice on my own, I've only had 2 clients who haven't paid their bill, which I think is just really extraordinary. But I think it's because they can look around this office and they know that not paying me is not paying me. There isn't a big machine, or it's not an impersonal thing where you can kind of let it roll off your back and not feel so bad about it.
Probably speaks to the service you give them, too. That ties in, doesn't it, to the ability of people to pay, or the willingness to pay?
I hope so. I often talk to my clients at the beginning of our representation, and I talk about value, and I talk about the various steps of the matter that we're going to work on. There are often things that a client can do, legwork. I'm working on a commercial transaction right now, and there are a lot of different steps and a lot of folks that need to be talked to, everybody from the Department of Transportation to a neighboring property. Sometimes I find my clients are in as good or better position to be making some of those contacts and calls. And if the client and I discuss that and we figure out what's the best use of my time and resources and what's the best use of theirs, when it comes down to paying my bill, they've already decided that it was more worthwhile to them to have me do those particular steps or actions. And so I think they do see that value in what they've hired me to do. And likewise, they appreciate that I've segregated out the things that they might be able to handle to help them manage their expenses.
I'm always interested in talking to lawyers who run their own law firm on how you got to wear a business person's hat as well as a lawyer's hat. You're trained as a lawyer, but then you have to be a business person too.
That's absolutely right. And one of the things I think I learned early on in practice is that just because you're an attorney, as an attorney, you come in contact with lots of different areas and you have an opportunity to learn about lots of different areas. That contact doesn't always make you very good at those other areas, but you really have to wear two hats. You have to take off, to a certain extent, the lawyer hat. I know it sounds a little weird, but I have a retreat with myself. I sit down and I look at my financials. I sit down and plan a budget. I sit down and look at the cash flow. And if you don't pay attention and do those business aspects, it's the same thing I tell my clients. You're going to run into trouble. You have to have different roles or you have to pay attention to different things at different times. And if you're not capable of it, then you need to hire out for those skills.
What I'm seeing and you probably see it too, in the climate today, lawyers hanging out their own shingle because of the tight job market, or law students graduating from law school willing to give that a shot because the other job options just aren't there. That's a tough road to hoe, isn't it?
It is. I went out on my own after 10 years of practice, and it was scary then. And I, at that point, thought I had practiced enough and knew enough that I might actually be able to do this. But I think back to when I originally started practicing, and the ability to walk down the hall and double-check something with somebody, or to be able to sit in on meetings first on interviewing clients and things of that nature. I really honestly can't imagine not having somebody right there to help coach me through that. And so I feel for some of the younger law students that are coming out and doing it on their own. But I think no matter what the situation is, you have to find a way. You will always need that when you're coming out of law school. So you have to find a way, if it's not within a firm, to get that same kind of mentorship or coaching.
How do they look for mentors? Is it networking? Is that part of it?
Sometimes it's networking. Sometimes it's through bar activities. I probably couldn't get through a conversation like this without touting the value of being involved with either your state or local bar association. I have found that to be just a world of assistance. Everything from sections where you'll meet people who are kind of practicing in the same areas, to just that ability to network with people and commiserate or celebrate with how your practice is going, or people who are willing to share. I'm just always amazed with the number of practitioners who will say, oh yeah, I did X or Y, or I used to advertise, or I used to do this, and I found it helpful or not helpful. So that information is out there.
So activities outside the office are just as important, if not more so, to your professional development and so forth.
They absolutely are, and especially I would say in the small law firm or solo practitioner setting. I find that most of my clients really come either from referrals from existing clients. I've done a good job with this client, and some friend or neighbor is looking to have something similar done, or it's through the outside activities, serving on boards or working with nonprofit organizations. And when people see how you work and interact with people, even if it's not law related, they will assume that that will translate. If you're diligent with your committee work and you come prepared, etc., they will assume that when you practice law that you would behave in that same fashion. And so I have found many times that committees or boards that I serve on, I end up getting referrals from people that I've met and worked with in that setting.
So, you're at the point where you probably don't have to do a whole lot of advertising and things like that. You're well known, you've been around a long time, you've been involved in many high-profile things. What about the lawyer who, maybe they're in their first couple of years and they want to do something like this, run their own office? They don't have the name recognition that you do. What can they do? Well,
I think first you examine the nature of your practice. There are some practices that really lend themselves to advertising. That is, when the person is going to look for a lawyer, they will go to the yellow pages. My practice is not really that. More often, business clients, if you're buying or selling a business or starting a business, you tend to look to your banker or your accountant or folks of that nature, and you'll ask for a referral. So I don't spend my time on advertising so much, but I do network with bankers and accountants. So look at the nature of your practice, and if your practice is perhaps personal injury or even family law, those tend to be perhaps a little bit more where somebody will look in the yellow pages. If your practice is a little bit more specialized, intellectual property, patents, trademarks, business, those kinds of things, then you want to look at who else your client is likely to have contact with and network with those kind of folks.
Is the internet, does that play more of a role in your practice now than, say, 10 years ago?
Well, certainly it does. Most clients want to have the ability to contact you via email and those kinds of things. Some clients will do some homework on their lawyers, searching on the internet and things of that nature. But again, I see some differences both in the nature of your practice and in the size of your practice. For me as a solo or as a small firm, I have not moved into a website, principally because I think, again, my practice tends to be one where people would really get to me through accountants and bankers. So if they found me on the internet, more than likely what they want is somebody to answer a quick question. And there are limits to being able to answer those questions when you don't really have an attorney-client relationship. So I don't think that would be particularly helpful to me. But larger firms, a lot of times people want to be able to look at how many people they have in various practice groups or the nature of the different practice groups that are within that firm. And so for larger firms, I think websites tend to bring more to the table.
Talk about handling clients. How do you keep good clients and how do you deal with the difficult clients?
Well, I've been very fortunate. I think one of the most important things that anyone ever told me at the beginning of my practice was to trust your instincts. When you get a call from somebody who's a potential client, you really have to stop and take a deep breath, especially in these tough economic times, and ask the questions that you think you need to know in order to determine whether you would be a good fit for them, and to give them an opportunity to ask questions to determine whether you'd be a good fit for them. I think in tough economic times, it's really easy to, jump at every phone call and look for every potential client. But in my experience, I have found that those can be some of the most difficult ones, and you kind of kick yourself afterwards. So I think it's really just a matter of really trying hard to make sure that the fit, what the client needs and what you're able to provide, really mesh well.
Are you able to say no easier today than you could 10 years ago?
I am. I remember when I first was with a medium-sized firm, and part of the compensation included credit for generating new clients, and so you were anxious to have somebody that was your client. Now that I've been in practice for 21 years total and on my own for 11, you have a better sense of the cycles, the time of the year, the nature of your practice, and so it's easier even when it's in a lull to know that that's a temporary lull, and so you don't need to jump at every phone call and every matter, especially if it's not within your practice area.
What resources do you regularly access for guidance at this point in your career?
Well, obviously I look for things that are specific to my area. I try to make sure that I stay with good state bar materials, form books, samples, treatises on the subject areas, and then likewise seminars on the subject areas. But the other thing is that the internet is kind of a great equalizer. You don't necessarily have to have on your shelf at any given moment the hordes of books that we used to. You might have a more unique situation and you can do searches, and there are resources, everything from the ABA to the State Bar to other state bars, where you will be able to buy just a snippet of, a segment of a CLE or a chapter of a book. And so there are lots of ways that you can kind of find something that might be specific to an issue that you're dealing with today.
Okay, now a couple of soul-searching questions. What do you wish you knew when you started in the practice that you didn't know at that time, that you know now?
I think I'd go back a little bit to the client selection. I think at the beginning of practice, I just had that kind of starry-eyed, everybody's entitled to representation, I can do this, I can be objective. And after you practice for a while, you really realize that, yes, everybody's entitled to representation, but it doesn't always have to be you. And it's okay. It's okay if you don't mesh with that particular client. It's okay if your work styles are different. There will be somebody out there that will be able to work well with them, and that it's probably better for you to have them work with somebody else if you are going to be constantly clashing with your client, and that client is never going to be happy. No matter what you earned in fees, it's not going to be worth it.
What would you change about your practice as a whole?
That one's a tough one because I'm pretty pleased with my practice. I enjoy the nature of my practice. From time to time, people have tried to encourage me to take on other areas of practice. But at 21 years of practice, I know these areas pretty well. I still get new questions and I still get challenged, which is intellectually fun. But every question does not throw, the fear of God into my gut going, where was this in law school? So I really enjoy the nature of my practice, and I think that the things that I am doing do mesh well together, both from a timing standpoint, real estate and estate planning and business formation. They have their own little cycles, and they're not all exactly the same. So it does provide some variety, and you kind of move from one to the other. So I enjoy that.
Are you able to control your hours at this point in your career, and compare that with somebody who's kind of starting out? They probably don't have the same kind of control.
Well, I think I probably only realized within the last couple of years that control of your hours is really just a figment of everybody's imagination. It's a service industry, and so we are at the whim of our clients, and most legal matters happen during the business day, but quite honestly, they don't all. You get the call at 5 minutes to 5, and you don't get to say, gee, I was just going out for dinner with my spouse. That's really when the client needs you the most, and so you have to make yourself available. Sometimes the timing of two transactions, something goes a little faster than you had anticipated, something else slows down, and now you have two closings within a week. So you don't get to go to the client and say, gee, this is really inconvenient. What you do get a chance to do is work on the schedule that works for you. I'm a morning person, and so I can come in at the crack of dawn. I'm really not good, pulling the all-nighter. So what you do have is some flexibility. I can schedule the meetings as early in the morning as I can get a client to be willing to come in. I can come in early to get work done. So you just find a time that works best for you, and then you fit all the rest of your obligations in around that.
And you run your own firm, so how do you balance your professional life with your family or personal life?
Well, part of that, too, is being realistic with yourself. If you have set particular goals in terms of income and things of that nature, or you have overhead obligations that you have to meet, you just have to figure out how to do those two things. I have a bunch of family obligations that are coming up in August. I'm taking my youngest away to college, etc. And so in my mind, I've blocked out the better part of the last 2 weeks of August to allow for really being there and being in the moment for taking my daughter to college. That means that I am not likely to take on a brand new matter that might have a tight deadline. I'm okay with that. I've figured out how to do that from a business standpoint. That means I need to finish some other projects early, or that may mean that there'll be a time lag in income because I finished up some matters and didn't take on other matters. But I think that's all part of planning, and it's all part of your own personal internal drivers. Are you okay with making a little less money in August? If you're not, then you'll spend more time on practice, and if you are, then you'll allow yourself a little extra time to do other things.
I've heard recently about some solos who have closed their office on Fridays, for example, things like that. Have you ever considered anything like that?
You know, actually, I have summer hours for my staff. I'm in the office on Friday, but Friday is a day that I kind of devote to practice management. I'll answer the phone and I'll be there for clients, but it tends to be a little bit more quiet, and I really do focus on my practice. I go through my financials. I do month-end correcting entries. I do planning for the projects that are up coming ahead, or I might just set aside time for drafting when I don't answer the phone. I think one of the biggest disservice that lawyers probably do to themselves is they really don't give themselves downtime. It took me a while to understand that if I really did give myself a little time for rejuvenation, I could actually be far more productive. And so I am a little bit better about that these days.
Tell me how you coordinate and work with staff, both hiring staff and making sure that your office is running the way you want it. Is there a trick to that?
There is. I'm not sure I know it, although I've been very, very fortunate. I think it's really, again, a communication issue. When I hired my associate, we talked probably more about communication style and goals and aspirations than we did about the substantive areas of law. I talked about the things that were important to me, outside activities, my family, those kinds of things. I asked what her goals were. She has small children. I asked whether she had if she had thought about some plan, whether it was full-time or part-time, and what her time horizon was. And I think having that opportunity to really have a frank discussion about that means there's less miscommunication or mixed expectations. I thought when you took this job, you were going to be dedicated to the job, you know? And so I think it's really just both knowing yourself and having clear communications, almost more on lifestyle than on substantive areas of law.
It sounds like you figure you can work with how you want your forms to look. That's easy. It's the fit that counts the most at the beginning.
Absolutely. I mean, and even if you don't know a particular area of the law, you can go to seminars. I can sit down and show you how to do something. But if we work 180 degrees opposite of each other, or we have goals that are 180 degrees opposite of each other, you don't teach somebody to play by your rules. It's just really going to be kind of knocking heads.
What one piece of advice would you give somebody who's considering a practice like this?
I would probably say you need to stop and think about what you really want out of the practice. If you think that practicing on your own will make you the boss and that you will control everything, you're wrong. You're right, but you're wrong. You are in control. You can decide how much time you spend working at things, and you can decide what kind of clients you take, and you can decide what kind of law you're going to practice. But as I said earlier, it's a service industry, and so you don't necessarily control when the client's going to need you or when the crisis is going to come. You don't control when the economy is going to tank, those kinds of things. And so sit down and spend some time really asking yourself what you want out of that and why you want to practice in that setting. Make sure that you are comfortable with the nature of that practice. I'm a very people-oriented person, and I think lots of people were surprised when I went out and practiced on my own. I think people just thought, well, how could she do that? I can, because I have created other circles where I can interact with lawyers and non-lawyers. So you have to think about the things that you will need, everything from forms and seminars to colleagues and outside interests, and make sure that you've kind of addressed all of those areas and that you know how you're going to get all of those needs met. And then you're set.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
You've been listening to a Law Practice Information Podcast, a service of Wisconsin Lawyers Mutual Insurance Company. For more information about our company, visit www.wilmick.com or call 1-800-373-3839.